Hello, everybody. Welcome to the newest episode of the Theater Enthusiast podcast. If you know me, you know that is a very big deal that I have this person on the podcast. I've been a fan of theirs since he was in Spamalot. He's the reason for my musical obsession, Once the Musical. Please welcome Tony and Grammy winner, Steve Kazee. Woo! Yeah. 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 Boop, boop, boop. I know you're a fan of wrestling, so I'm trying to think of like a really big, like,
Oh yeah, I mean,
so
if we have
what would
some
your
classic
intro be
in the
for that?
background, what's that?
What would your intro be if you were like a WWE wrestler?
Oh God, I don't know because there's so many good ones already out there. I'd probably have to be something like really dramatic, obviously, but
Yeah.
like with a little touch of like, kind of like a little bit of like Southern, like badass walking down to the ring kind of vibe, because I grew up in Kentucky, so I'd need to put a little bit of that in there, but I don't know.
It would be like he broke hearts in once.
I once was asked to do pilot for a wrestling TV show that was like a commentary show, and they had me cut a promo on Hugh Jackman, which was pretty amazing. If I think I might have put that on my Instagram, but I was really hoping at some point to be able to like be a wrestler, but the clock ran out on that one for sure.
Well, they have a wrestling musical, and I know this because like Ramin Carmelu has been in it. So
Really? Oh
yeah,
wait, I saw this.
yeah. So like
That's right.
it's a thing. Maybe
I
that
don't know.
will entice the people to bring you back to New York and Broadway because I'm still hoping for it. One of
Yeah.
these days. One of these days. I already told you like my manifestation dream for you already because I know you want that show, but we'll get into it later. So Steve, thank you so much for coming on. Like
Of
I've already
course.
told you, like I'm a very big fan of yours ever since Spamalot years ago. Um,
Mhm.
so let's start from the beginning. You already said you're from Kentucky, so let's talk more about that. Where in Kentucky are you from?
Yeah, I was born and raised in a little small town. I mean, smallish, like I think 25, 26,000 people when I grew up there. That's like the main town. And then I grew up out in the country part of it.
Mhm.
Um, I went to a high school where I had, probably 30, I think it was like 38, 39 students in my class. It was a really,
Yeah.
tiny school, and didn't really know what I wanted to do with my life. And I got involved in choir. I think it was my like sophomore or junior year of high school. And, I kind of always been around music growing up and liked to sing and liked to play guitar, but never really had done choir or anything, sort of organized. And so I got into choir and really kind of found my place. I think we're all looking for our place when we grow up. So I found my place there. And then that roundabout somehow, led me to, I flunked out of community college. I mean, I went to a small community college, flunked out because I was miserable, like living in my hometown, 13th grade. It was not good. So I decided to transfer to like the bigger university, got involved in choir there. I'm sorry, not choir. I got involved in theater there because of my background in singing. And then, I spent some time there. That was a little school called Morehead State University.
Mhm.
Uh, then I went and did a little bit of outdoor drama, which sort of like gave me this idea of like, why am I in school? Because like I'm already doing what I want to do. So like, let me just drop out like an idiot. And so I dropped out of school for like 3 years and just sort of did as much community theater in any town that would have me. Went to Syracuse for a while, went to a little town called Oceano, California, all these things. And then moved back home in 2001 because my mom got sick. So I moved home to take care of her and decided to go back to school. One thing led to another. I got into NYU, into grad school, and boom, I was in New York and sort of on my way. Obviously, a lot more, happening in between all those years, but that's the sort of Cliff Notes version of, I think, how I ended up in New York.
Yeah. So what made you decide that you wanted to go to NYU for your master's?
Um, you know, I don't know. I mean, the story that I always tell, which is it's a true story, but it's become a bit of a story,
Mhm.
was that I was, at that school, I had the like the privilege and the luxury of being in a lot of shows, and I was I was able to like really play a lot of the leads, and it was where I sort of had started to find that like, oh, I'm like really good at this. I think, like for a person who doesn't have a lot of confidence in themselves, I was like, oh, like I feel like I'm good at this. And then a friend of mine and I were talking about like, well, like how good do you think you could be? And I said, I don't know. And then we talked about what we're going to do after graduation. And I said, I really want to go to New York, but I don't think that I can just go there and like afford it, because I grew up very poor. I didn't have the kind of like financial backing to be able to do that. And he was like, well, what about grad school? And I was like, oh, I never thought about it. I'd really just never thought about like going to, further my sort of education. So I look up, what are the best grad schools for acting? And it was Yale and NYU at the time. I auditioned for both of them and got into NYU, which still today makes no sense to me at all. I mean, that process, I think they get over 1,800 applications and they end up accepting 18 kids,
Mm-hmm.
And for a kid like me who grew up, in a trailer park in the middle of nowhere to like all of a sudden be a first year student at NYU graduate acting, it was just, it took me probably the first year to just sort of believe that it was all happening, to be honest.
Yeah. So when you graduated NYU, you were very fortunate enough to be, hold on, I had to read the name of the show. The subject was Roses at the Kennedy Center.
Yeah, the subject was Roses.
Yeah.
That was actually...
I do my research, Steve, don't worry.
Well, here, I'll give you a little bit of like deep cut that I don't think anybody really knows. So my first job out of college was Shakespeare in the Park.
Oh, wow.
And that was directed by Mark Lamos. It was As You Like It with Lynn. Oh, I'm blanking on her last name. And James Waterston, so Sam Waterston's son, who's an actor, great actor, and Jennifer Ikeda. It was like a really cool. Michael Esper was in that cast. It was like a really cool cast, but they had a habit of like, kind of casting some of the spear carriers from NYU graduate acting. And so I got into that show. I was the understudy for Orlando. Yes. And then when that show ended, Mark asked me to be the understudy for Fred Weller in Edward Albee's Seascape. So I was actually an understudy on Broadway in an Edward Albee play, and got to go on, I think, 3 times and played opposite Elizabeth Marvel and George Grizzard and Frances Sternhagen, which was quite the Broadway debut. Yeah. But no one really knows that I was in that show.
Yeah, you know what? I apologize because I do have like the timeline written out and I jumped the gun on Seascape. So
no, it's fine. Yeah. Honestly, it's a thing that I don't know anybody who knows that information. You know what I mean? Because it's just the nature of the business. Sometimes like you only are known for the thing that you get known for. Yeah. I think a lot of people think that I just like jumped into once and that was my one and only Broadway show. And like,
Well, I will say like, if like, again, I don't mean to sound like a super crazy person fan wise, but no, because like, if you're a fan of a performer and you know them from like, at least for me, if I see somebody in a show that I like, I was a huge fan of the History Boys when I was on Broadway, and ever since I've like followed everyone's career. So like Jamie Parker, he's known for being Harry Potter, and he's very well known in the UK, but I know him from the History Boys, and a lot of people are like, who's that person? Like he was in that show, and like look at James Corden, like what everybody knows him from, but I know him from the History Boys. So I think it depends on the person and who they're fans of. I unfortunately did not see Seascape, but I knew you were in your study and you were dressed as
it was a cool experience. It was Edward was still alive and was at the theater every day. And so I had done for one of my graduate performances in my undergraduate or for my like senior performances in undergraduate, I had done Zoo Story. And so all of a sudden I'm like there with Edward Albee every day in the theater, just kind of sitting right next to him, watching rehearsals. And, it was like such a cool experience. But while I was doing that, I got the audition for The Subject Was Roses at the Kennedy Center. And that was Judith Ivey and Bill Pullman, which was like, for me, like having grown up, a huge fan of Bill Pullman's work. And then obviously knowing Judy's work. it was like, again, I've had a lot of these moments in life where I just look around and I don't understand like how I am where I am. It just doesn't make a ton of sense to me.
Yeah.
So yeah, so that was at the Kennedy Center. Really cool, like great experience. I
Mhm.
wouldn't have traded it for the world. It was like a really awesome time.
Yeah. And you got a Hayes nomination.
I did.
Yeah.
I did.
Didn't they? So I I remember like watching your show People with Paul Wontorek, and
Yeah.
they were talking about the Tony experience with him, and you were saying how you were nominated for a Hayes Award and you went down there and they pronounced your name
Yeah.
wrong.
That's why I'm laughing, because that's my favorite story of that whole experience. It's like,
Yeah.
it's just such a humbling experience. I had like taken the train down and I was so excited. I'm like, I can't believe I'm nominated for Best Actor for a Helen Hayes Award. Like, oh my God.
Yeah.
And I'm like front row, just smiling as happy as I can be. And then they get to my name and like completely mangle it. And I
Yeah.
was like, and then I lost and I was like,
Well,
that's a bummer.
you know what I found really like adorable was so in my research before this interview, I stumbled upon this interview from the Kennedy Center with you, Bill, and Judith, and like they're just
What?
yeah, and you're sitting there in like a tie and a blazer,
Yeah.
like for this talk back that you're doing. It's like
Yeah.
it's a deep cut. I can send it to you if you want. It's like an hour
Please.
long deep
I
cut.
would love to see that. I have
Yeah.
no idea that that existed.
Oh yeah, I didn't either. I literally because like when you YouTube you, it's mostly like once performances and like
Yeah.
that's you did from Twilight and like some concert performances you did. And I
Yeah.
stumbled upon the show and I've never heard of it. So I was, doing my research on the show, seeing what it is. And when you like look at videos on Google, like that's when this video popped up of this interview.
Yeah. It's actually, believe it or not, like it's a not a well-known play.
Yeah.
Um, it was they made it into a movie, which
Mhm.
was, I think, a little bit more well-known, but it was such a good play. Like it was a really great play. And to just like be in a three-hander with those two,
Yeah.
come on.
Yeah.
It was
And
so amazing.
so my question is, all these years later, do you think you know what happens at the end of the show, or did you ever find that out? Because I know that was like a question that was asked, and you're like, I don't want to know. I
Yeah.
what
I
happened.
I never wanted to know.
Hmm.
I was lucky enough to spend a lot of time with the playwright, um, and I mean, I don't really like, if it's not ever on the page, I don't really need to know kind of
Yeah.
vibe, because I think if it was meant to know, it would be on the page, if that makes sense. I mean, I think the writer always has some sort of story and they always know. It was such an autobiographical piece,
Hmm.
for the writer, that I think that, he definitely knew, but it just wasn't something that I wanted to know. I kind of like kept that a little sacred, that
Yeah.
was just a private moment
Yeah.
situation.
Like to this
Yeah.
day, still don't know, nor do you want to.
No,
Yeah.
don't know, don't want to.
It's always
Yeah.
interesting too with things like that. So, like with the shape of things, with the two leads, they whisper something to each other's ear. Like nobody knows
Hmm.
what they whispered except the actors. Uh,
Yeah.
with Doubt, you don't know whether or not he did it.
Yeah.
At least in the play version, I feel that way.
Yeah.
Different feelings with other things.
Yeah.
And then also like Red Light Winter, the Adam
Yeah.
Round. Yeah. Well, I will say though, I during the pandemic, I worked on some virtual stuff, and one of them was that play, and we had him on for a Q&A after the reading, and he did say like what he thinks happened after, but still with that.
Yeah, I'm always of the mindset that like I like an ambiguous ending, right?
Yeah.
I'm not really the kind of audience that I don't enjoy a tight bow.
Mhm. Yeah.
Not to skip too far ahead, but it was one of the reasons why I loved Once so much,
Yeah.
is because it is such an ambiguous ending. And every time you think you have an idea of like what might have happened, there's like always that little thing of doubt in your head where you go like, well, or it might have gone this way, or it might have gone that way. And I think that's the thing that like keeps it so visceral in a way. It keeps your emotions really attached to it.
Yeah. So like for you, his name will always be Guy.
Yeah, for sure.
Well, also that's fine because there's a movie that exists in the world which has
Hmm.
a character where the character's name is Guy. So
Yeah.
that could just be his name.
Yeah. Yeah.
You-
No, that was never even a question. We never even brought, like, it was never like, well, what do you think his name is? It was never that.
No, I remember the Broadway.com questionnaire. Sorry, I'm doing
Yeah,
like a really deep dive in like all of
it's
your
okay. It's all
uh
right.
but that was like one of the questions, and Krista Milioti was like, I don't know. And her like,
Yeah,
yeah, she was malfunctioning.
yeah.
So after Seascape happened and you understudied, what happened next? What was your next
Well, that
steps?
was when I went to the Kennedy Center,
Hmm.
did that show.
Yeah.
And God, it's been so long now. It's like hard to remember the chronology. But I think after that,
Hmm.
um, I came back, and that would have been like in 2006-ish, I
Yeah.
think. Somewhere along the way here. So yeah, that would have been I think that was over in like late 2005. So early 2006, I auditioned for Spamalot,
Hmm.
but I auditioned for the national tour of Spamalot.
Interesting.
And I was, still very fresh out of school and, obviously very nervous about auditioning in front of Mike Nichols and Eric Idle. I'd grown up on Monty Python, like literally watching PBS late night, Benny Hill, Monty Python. I was like a very strange kid where I was from, but I loved Monty Python, like loved it, loved it, loved it. So I was really nervous, and they had made a mistake on the like the audition sheet that they sent to me, and it asked for 16 bars of, or not even 16 bars. Prepare a full song, but they wanted contemporary, traditional, musical theater comedy song, and I was like, contemporary, traditional, like what is that can't be, that's not a real thing. So I like went into like a little bit of a panic about like, oh God, like, what do I do? Like, how am I gonna, like, what am I gonna do? And I was on the subway headed home, and David Costabile, who had gone to NYU, um, hold on one second. Of course, my dogs are gonna interrupt here.
It's okay. I'm gonna pause. Go ahead.
So I was on the subway and I ran into David Costabile, who had gone to NYU and who was my clown teacher for one of the shows that we were on. Because David Costabile, a lot of people don't know this, one of the greatest clowns I've ever seen in my life. Like, he really like is an incredible actor. He's a superior, talented clown. So
Mhm.
he was my clown teacher. I'm on the subway. He's like, "What's going on? You seem stressed out." I tell him, I'm like, yeah, I've got this audition. I don't know what to do. And I told him the thing about, and they sent this thing and it's all messed up. And he goes, "Oh, that's really funny." He's like, "You should write your own song." And I was like, "What?" And he's like, "Yeah, go find like an old Broadway standard and just rewrite it, like make it funny." I was like, okay. So I was young enough and fresh out of school enough that I was dumb enough to think that this was a great idea. So I
Mhm.
went home, and I had an old songbook of like Broadway standards, and I chose The Impossible Dream. And basically, I wrote this song about how I need this job, really, really need this job. And you guys have now sent me on this impossible quest to find a song that doesn't exist. Right. And so it was, I just did the whole song and I rewrote the lyrics, and I just went out and like, I really like, it's a testament to like just kind of like going for it,
Mhm.
not knowing how it's going to go. So I walk out, Mike was old school and wants you to audition in the theater, right? So I went to the Schubert and I walk out on stage, and all I see in the audience are those black frame glasses, the famous Mike Nichols, like
Yeah.
black frame glasses. And I had taken with me this random, like, pink squishy ball that had like all these little tentacles off of it. I don't even know why I had this in my house, but so I got this like squishy ball, and I carried this big bag out onto stage with me. And it looked like it was like full of all this stuff, but in reality, it just had this like pink ball in it. So I'm like dragging this ball out, and I kind of set it down on stage, and I reached down in the bag and pull out this pink ball, and I put it in my shirt and just gave myself like a Richard III hump.
Mhm.
And then I start this very dramatic like process to like get into character, and then I finally like look over and I get the conductor to start playing, and then I do the song. And it was absurd, and it was a little dirty and a little like, out there. But all I hear is like silence. Like the worst kind of silence, and obviously like it's only him and like two other people out there, but it's
Yeah.
just a dead zone. So I finish, they have me do the scenes, and I basically get a thank you. And I was like, okay, thank you. I leave and I'm in Schubert Alley. And I mean, I am like more dejected than I've ever been, and probably still to this day. Like it was just devastating, heartbreaking. And then the musical director comes running out into Schubert Alley and he's like, hey, I just wanted to tell you, like, I'm going to be straight up with you. We already have a Lancelot for the tour. Like, we are just looking for someone to understudy on tour. And so we need somebody who can like also move. And that's not you. But he was like, Mike absolutely loved your audition just now. And you're going to be in Spamalot someday. And I was like, yeah, buddy, whatever. Like, thanks for the ego, Pat. Yeah,
Yeah.
I'm good. Like, I don't need all that. Like, thank you, whatever. I walk off and I was just like, I mean, I was inconsolable for days. And then months later, I get a call and they're like, hey, Mike Nichols needs you to fly to Boston to take the train to Boston tonight. And I was like, wait, what? And they were like, yeah. So there is an opening for Lancelot on Broadway, and they want you to come re-audition for Mike and Eric and the entire creative team up in Boston because they're opening the tour tonight in Boston. I was like, oh God, okay. So I literally within an hour's time was on the Amtrak to Boston. I get there and Mike is like, oh, my boy, I'm so happy you came. He's like, it was such a, Mike was like such a character, but at his soul, he was like the most gentle and kind human I've ever been around. Like, I loved that man.
Mhm.
And, he said, I just wanted you to come up and do your audition for Eric so he can, have a laugh. And I was like, okay, great. He goes, so just do exactly what you did before, but do the whole thing. He goes, do you have the pink thing? And I said, yes. And he was like, okay, do the whole thing. So I go out, I do the audition. Eric comes up to the stage and he's like, you're very funny. And I was like, oh, I thank you. He's like, it means so much to me. And Mike was like, well, thank you so much for coming up. I got on an Amtrak back to New York. I mean, it was that kind of trip. You know what I mean? Like, I didn't even stay the night.
Yeah.
And on the train ride back, I got the call from my agent and they were like, hey, you're doing Spamalot on Broadway. And I was like, my mind just like exploded. I was replacing Hank Azaria and
Yeah.
I just couldn't fathom it. It didn't make any sense. Again, this is a running theme in my life. Like, it made no sense that I was now going to be doing, a Broadway show.
Yeah. Yeah. I got some visitors in the back. So,
That's all right.
yeah.
That's all right. So, I made it back to New York on cloud nine. And then I think I started rehearsal pretty soon after that,
Mhm.
which is in itself a very strange thing to do, replace anyone on Broadway.
Mhm.
But, you're just in a room with the associate director and the choreographer, and like, you just kind of like put it all together and then they throw you in it. And
Yeah.
there I was, like
Yeah.
living my best life for 6 months. I only did the show for 6 months.
Mhm.
But in that time, it was quite an experience.
Yeah. I'm just going to pause this for a second.
Talking about
So we were mentioning before we had a brief pause, Spamalot replacing. So what is it like to replace in a Broadway musical like that? Because it was, won a lot of Tonys that year. It was up against like, I think that was the year of Piazza and a bunch of,
05. Yeah, I
yeah,
think so.
yeah, I think it
Yeah,
was
'cause
Piazza.
it was people were laughing because this year's Tonys, could end up being like a repeat of 2000, because I think Piazza might be coming back and like, so.
I actually I announced today James D. Gish as my next guest, and he actually did the City Center Piazza, and probably like the best version of Love to Me I've ever heard sung. And
Oh yeah.
Piazza is, I have three favorite musicals. It's Piazza, Once, and Great Comet.
Oh
And
wow.
yeah, so I was a little like apprehensive about seeing it because, with like your favorite shows, you're like, I don't
Yeah, for
know, it
sure.
means so much to me. But I like, even when I sent the email offer, I was like, it's literally the best version I've ever heard sung of Love to Me. And
Uh,
it was just incredible. But I don't know if it's going to happen.
Mm,
because there's a lot of revivals coming this season. You know, you have
yeah.
Cabaret, you have Spamalot, there's other ones that I can't think of right now off the top of my
Yeah.
head.
It feels like it's a definite revival heavy season over there.
Yeah, and it's interesting too, because like, you know, the Broadway World Boards, people are like, you're not really seeing any like play revivals coming out.
No,
Yeah, it's just very
no.
interesting. But
It's a very strange time in the
yeah,
world of theater, I feel like. But it's hard too because I'm at such a distance from it that it just probably seems a lot stranger to me. And
yeah,
if you're in it, it probably doesn't seem as strange. It probably just feels like, more of the same. But
yeah.
it feels very strange from Los Angeles. But everything feels strange in Los Angeles. So
Yeah. Well, I mean, there is a lot of theater out in Los Angeles too. Have you like tried, other than something we're going to talk about later on, but have you tried to
yeah,
do anything out there?
not really, to be
Mhm.
honest. I think I needed a little bit of time away from it to just be frank about it. I had been kicking around for so long that I think once I got here, I just needed to take a little break,
Yeah.
um, and see just where the heart lies in the world of creativity and
Mhm.
that kind of grind. It's a real grind, you
Yeah.
know. But yeah, so anyway, we were saying about Spamalot, like replacing on Broadway it's like jumping onto a moving train. Like it's just, especially that show, it was like you said, it was such a huge hit. Even by the time that I got there, it was still really, really insanely popular. And, we were in for, we were the first replacements for the most part. Alan Tudyk had come in and done like a 6-week run when
I'm
Hank had.
very well aware. I had like an obsession with him like my freshman year of college, and that's why I
Yeah,
saw Spamalot so many times. So like,
yeah,
because to me, he was in a movie that I shall not name because of the SAG after strike, and I don't want to
sure.
do anything with that. But yeah, like every time I went to the show and I stage doored, I always took a photo with him. It was very, if anybody asked like what's the most embarrassing like thing that's ever happened to you, I'd be like that like freshman year of college, my like Alan Tudyk phase. I look back and I'm
Yeah,
like, oh God, why was I like that? But yeah,
yeah.
he was very nice, but still.
He was a nice guy. He was great. He was around a little bit when I was there, so I got a chance to spend some time with him. But
Yeah.
so we were the first replacements. Marty Moran and I, we were the first replacements
Yeah.
for all intents and purposes. Simon Russell Beale was King Arthur, and then Harry Groener came in halfway through my run. But it was,
Did
it was a
Lauren
really.
Kennedy come in after or before you to
So
replace?
Lauren was there before me. She came in a little bit before me, I think. So there had been some turnover, but the show was still really popular and was a huge hit. And
Mhm.
so to be able to to jump into your first real sort of like lead on Broadway in that kind of a show at that speed, and to like have to be funny all the time was a real, it was a feat. I feel like I really accomplished something in that. And I think it also gave me a lot of confidence moving forward in my life of just like, oh, like I can do this, like I think I said before, I've always struggled a little bit with confidence. And so little things like that happening, always gave me just this refreshing sense of like, oh, wow, I can do this. This is really cool. Like, I wonder where this will take me now.
Yeah.
So
Well, I mean, it took you to starring opposite the queen, one of the queens of Broadway,
that's right.
Dr. McDonald. But I want
Another show that I feel like not a lot of people know that I was in it, like again, it's just like I think people, the casual fan of Broadway, and I mean people who are fans of Broadway, but just like not, super fans of Broadway.
yeah,
Um, the casual fan, I don't think knows that I was in that show,
yeah,
which is,
yeah.
you know,
Well, I think it
it's
like,
always, it's nice. It's like having a little secret.
yeah, like the Broadway fans know that you're in 110 in the Shade. But before we
Yeah.
get into that, I'm just curious to know what it was like to work with Mike Nichols.
Oh my God. Uh, I don't even know if I can like get through talking about him without crying because every time I try to talk about him, I cry. Like Mike,
But it's going to be okay because once we talk about once, I'm sure there will be a moment where I do cry.
fair
So
enough.
apologize. I mean, like I said, interview that guy about Piazza, and I started to get emotional about it. So
Yeah.
yeah, sorry, trying
Um,
to move my chair.
I knew coming into it, I knew Mike Nichols as a talent, obviously. I knew of his talent as an artist and as a performer and as a director. And like, I knew all of the things that everyone knows about Mike.
Mhm.
What I didn't know about Mike was like the size of the man's heart. And it's hard to explain how good he was to me, how kind he was to me, and
Mhm.
how much he really sort of like put himself under the wings of actors in order to like lift them up to be as good as they can be.
Mhm.
And it just went so far beyond performing. It was really about life and just living. It's hard. It's really hard to put it into words.
Mhm.
Um, but I was lucky enough that I had him for, I think, almost 3 weeks of that process.
Mhm.
And then he was still noting the show and would still come in, quite often and sit in my dressing room and just talk and, tell me stories and tell me stories about his life and, how he met Diane and how their love story had gone. And it was just a really special experience. And a lot of times in these shows, especially if you're not the original cast, I've found you're just sort of like, you come in and you don't really get the A team. You get the B team, and the B team is great, but
Mhm.
the director's usually gone and off to their next project. And so to have him around was just really special. Once the show ended, I thought, well, that's it. Like that was my time working with Mike, and like I'll probably never see him again. And but it was a great experience, and that just wasn't the case. Like we ended up keeping in touch up until he passed away, and he was just always Mike. Like I'll never forget. They threw a big birthday party for him, and I got invited, and I show up and I'm like at the door, and he walks in and he sees me and he goes, "Whoa, what the fuck are you doing here?" And I said, "Well, I'm here to celebrate your birthday." And he goes, "Oh God, don't you have better things to do with your day?" He was just like, that was just he was the most dry
Mhm.
human I'd ever been around, but he was just beautiful, like this room was full of like the A-list of A-list of A-list.
Mhm.
Didn't need to talk to me. Like he could have gone that whole time without coming over and talking to me. But like he saw me and he was like, "Oh, it's my guy. Like this is my boy." He always called me my boy. My boy. He came over and he just spent so much time talking to me that I had to be like, "Mike, go be with, go do your thing. It's your birthday. Happy birthday." And give him a big hug. Um, saw him at the Tonys, obviously, the night that we all won.
Mhm.
And that was just a really special experience.
Wasn't
He
that the
came.
year? That was also the same year as Death of a Salesman, right?
Yeah, yeah,
Yes. Okay. It's coming, and because he directed that, it's all coming back. Because Jake.
yeah.
Yeah.
That was a
Yeah.
crazy Tony. That was like, it was for me. It was such a special experience. Well, we'll get to. I'm sure we'll
Yeah.
get
Well,
there. I'll tell
we're
you
gonna
more
talk
about that.
about it. Don't worry. It's like,
So that was, my
yeah.
time working with Mike. It was just really, really tremendous and special, and like I hold it close to my heart as like one of my favorite experiences for sure.
Well, speaking of another great experience, as we mentioned before, working with Mike Nichols, working with Queen Audra McDonald.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
yeah, she's
The other like love of my life. I love that woman.
yeah. Well, it's interesting because when I ask people like top going theater experiences, and sometimes I'll mention mine, and one of them was seeing her in Lady Day at Emerson's Bar and Grill as Billie
Oh wow.
Holiday. And I used to do merch at Broadway shows, and that was one of the shows that I like worked at once or twice. I don't remember the whole details of it. It was so many years ago. But I was lucky enough to like the house manager like gave me a cushion to sit somewhere and circle in the square. And I watched the show, and I just remember like walking home to my apartment and telling my mom, I was like, it was literally an acting, like a master class
Yeah.
of like what to do as a performer and as an actor. She's incredible.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, this, like I said, this is a running theme, but you talk about like an out of body experience.
Yeah.
I got this audition and I thought, well, there's zero chance I'm getting this show. Like, Ain't no way. I
Yeah.
went in for my first audition, which was just like, I think me, Lonnie Price and a reader and a piano player, it wasn't like anything big, normal first audition for like somebody who like had 0 credits, basically, replacement in Spamalot.
Yeah.
And, then next thing I know, they wanted to do like a chemistry read with Audra and I was like, okay.
Mm-hmm.
So I go to the thing and it's, I won't name names, but it's like me and like 5 other Tony Award winners and all the guys that I had like, been listening to cast albums with them on it, and I was just like, holy shit. And they're all looking at me like, who the fuck is this guy? Pardon my language. But I was like,
You
I
can
was like,
curse as much as you want on this podcast.
okay, good, good.
Yeah.
Well, I was looking at all those guys like, holy shit. And they were looking at me like, who the fuck is this guy?
Mm-hmm.
And I was like, well, this is never going to happen, but this is the coolest thing ever. Like, I can't believe like, oh, there's that guy. Oh my God, there's that guy. Oh my, I was still that person, like I was still that kid, that theater loving kid. And then, we went in to the audition and we read together. And like from the get-go of meeting Audra, we just hit it off like a brother and a sister. Like it just was immediate.
Mm-hmm.
It just was instantaneous. And it was like one of the coolest like chemistry reads I've ever had, and it just felt like meeting an old friend,
Yeah.
But even then I was like, well, this was great. And how cool to have like, I met Audra McDonald today. Like, this is crazy. This is so much fun. I'm never going to get this show, but like, what a cool experience. I'll be able to talk about this forever. And then I got it. And like, I just didn't make any sense. And I was just like, again, on a different planet for a while.
Mm-hmm.
And then we're in rehearsal, and I'm just like every day watching a master class, and every day I'm feeling like an audience more than I am a performer. I'm like looking at her and just like, oh my God, like it's like having imagine just Audra McDonald coming to your house and sitting in a chair across from you and just singing. And that's what it was every day.
I just like, I don't know how to like, how my feelings would be if that were to happen to me in real life, because she's also like one of 3 people I want to have to sing me to bed. So just like her, Norm Lewis, and Jeremy Jordan, if they just want to get together and just, perform for me while I like fall asleep, that would be great.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. You can join them too with your guitar,
For sure.
Yeah.
I'd be happy to.
Lullabies. Thank you.
Yeah.
Oh, the dog is.
So she was and is an incredible human being.
Yeah.
Who also happens to be one of the most talented people on the face of earth.
Yeah.
And so like when you have that combination of just like an incredible person, a warm, wonderful human being who also is just like insanely talented, it just is like such a once in a lifetime experience. I don't know that it will ever, it can't be replicated,
Yeah.
And that whole cast, to be honest, I mean, John Cullum and Chris Invar and Bobby Steggert and Carla Duran, they were all such wonderful people. Betsy Wolfe was in that cast.
Oh, wow.
Betsy was in the ensemble. Mamie Paris was in that ensemble. Like, it's just like a great group of people. Darius Garland was in there. It was like so many people. So loved that show, loved working with her, and have been lucky enough to call her a friend ever since, and I don't want to take too much credit, but I do feel like I missed a show because I fell off stage and sprained my ankle pretty bad, and my understudy had to go on. And I don't know if you know who my understudy was in that show.
It was Senor Swenson.
And I don't want to say that's the night they fell in love, but that might have been the night they fell in love. And that might be the reason why they're still together today. And that might be the reason why they have a beautiful child together. So I don't want to take full credit, but.
Well, I hope that you have like said that to them. Like, by the way, you should like name your first child after me.
No, I didn't. I don't think I actually had anything to do with it, but I always laugh. I was like, oh, it's like such a sweet moment though. Like, imagine like, you're in a show, you're understudying, and then you go on with a person who like eventually becomes your wife and like mother of your children. It's like such a beautiful little story, and I was happy to like be a little tiny part of it for sure.
Yeah. So I want to talk quickly, because you mentioned about like your audition for Spamalot and for 110 in the Shade, how you're just like, I like, don't think I'm going to get this at all. Like, I'm just here. Do you think that might have helped you with your audition of just being like, I'm just going to go in, do my thing. I don't think I have a shot of doing this.
Yeah, I mean, I think to a certain extent, but I also think there's something to be said about just, you know, just letting go and like, trusting that like if it's meant to be, it's meant to be. That was a hard lesson to learn, and it's still a lesson that I struggle with. But in those cases, I think part of I joke about it, but I do think part of it was just like, you don't know what you don't know, basically.
Yeah.
And so like I say too young to know better, but it was kind of that. It was just like, oh, well, like this is just an audition.
Mhm.
Now, I mean, I would be so in my head going into an audition
Mhm.
because just like I just know too much,
Yeah.
and you would think it would go the opposite way of like the more you do it, the more you could let go. But I don't think that's true. I think it was a lot easier when I was younger because it's just like a sort of devil may care attitude.
It's funny.
Uh,
I struggle with that with these interviews because I've done so many of them, but I still get nervous before I speak to people.
yeah,
So I understand. Like when we were first
yeah.
talking, I was like, oh my God, I'm sweating. Like it's fine. I know he's
Sorry,
super
I feel the
nice.
same way.
Like, yeah. I even put on a black shirt and I was like, wouldn't it be funny if he was also in a black shirt? He got the
Oh
memo.
yeah. Well,
Black.
that's like always. I don't think I'm ever not. I'm either in a black shirt or a white shirt. And I get so much grief from my family because my closet just it's literally like 4 white shirts, 4 black shirts,
Mhm.
one maybe gray shirt, and then just jeans.
Just be like,
Like,
I lived in New York for so many years. Like black
yeah,
is everyone's color.
it's all I wear. I mean, that was my color before I got to New York, which is probably why I fit into New York so well. But yeah, I'm not out there pushing the boundaries of fashion. But the good thing, I feel like I stay in the same place so much that I'm always in fashion. Like it always swings back around to like jeans and a t-shirt being just like in fashion.
You
You know,
can't really like go wrong with jeans and a t-shirt, you know?
no,
Yeah,
no.
no matter the color. So how did you get to be or not to be? Do you think that's another forgotten play that people we can
That
move
one, that
we,
one I'm happy is forgotten. That was
okay.
the worst experience of my life.
So we can not talk about it.
No, we could talk about it. I don't care. I have no problem talking about it.
I did
Um,
not see the show. I just remember like a photo of you and Jane Maxwell. I know that there was like a Mel Brooks movie with the same title.
yeah,
Don't think
yeah.
it's the same as the play you did.
There's actually 2 movies.
Yeah, I
So
think
there's the Jack Benny Carol Lombard version of it.
yeah.
Then Mel Brooks redid it, and
Mhm.
then we did a play of it. Listen, that was in 2008, I believe.
Yes.
And that's been far enough removed now that like we can all laugh about it. But
Mhm.
when I tell you it was a doomed production, like we started off rehearsal. Within the first 2 days of the table read, one of our main actors quit the show. Then within a couple more days of that, the playwright quit and also like decided to like throw a major fit before he left the room that we were all in, like swearing and saying we were turning his play into a fucking sitcom. Like he was like mad, threw a huge fit, left. Rehearsal was rough. It was very tense and very rough. There were a few times where, there was just like bad blood between people in the show and like it just wasn't great. Like I'm trying to think of like how much I want to say, but let's put it this way, at a certain point, we had to have uh, Lynn Meadow, who I love and adore and think is like one of the greatest minds in
Yeah.
theater, had to literally come have a sit down and just be like, all right, like what's going on? Like this, it was just the show. I felt like I've never felt this way in my life, but I felt like the show was cursed. Like it just felt like if it could go wrong, it would go wrong.
Mhm.
And the one bonus was that all of the actors were lovely people, like really lovely people. So we all got along very well.
Yeah.
There was not a lot of conflict between the actors. The conflict was just with like was a tough play. Like it was a really hard play to make work. And it's a comedy that's not really a comedy. And so we were just like trying to, make a diamond out of peanut butter. And it just like wasn't really working. And then the tricky part is like when you're doing a subscription house like that, like you're running whether you want to be running or not. So if there's 10 people in the audience, you have a show. If there's 100 people, you have a show. If there's 1,000 people, you have a show. That show, if it had been a Broadway show, like just a regular Broadway show, would have closed within like a day. Like it was bad. It was Entertainment Weekly's worst show of 2008, which it was well deserving of that honor. It was just a bad experience.
Well, you had one, so there you go.
Yeah. And the truth was is it was like, I was pretty young still at the time. Sorry, I just dropped my pen. I was pretty young at the time. I don't think I handled the situation as well as I could have handled the situation. I got very frustrated, and just felt like there was a real lack of like, I don't know, just any structure. And so, I could have probably handled myself better. And we got to the end, and Craig Vierco, who was the lead of the show at the time, he basically right before tech was like, yeah, no, this is not working out for me. I'm gonna head out. And we were all like, wait, what? Well, like, no, you can't. Like, it's tech week. Like, what do you like? You can't. We're in our last week of rehearsal. Like, you can't leave. And he was like, no, that's it. Like, pretty much done with all this. Like, we had one bad day in rehearsal where things just kind of went south for everybody. And he just said, all right, I'm done. And I got home that night. My agent called and was like, hey, so Craig just quit the show. They're trying to find somebody to replace. And, Craig and I have talked about this, because for a long time I was like, I didn't love the fact that he had left. But then, later on when we talked, I was like, I get it. You're just trying to take care of yourself as an actor. And, later on in life, I think that has become a valuable lesson for me, is like, we don't always feel like we have the agency to like take care of yourself. And he was trying to take care of himself. And I fully understood, but it made it difficult. Then we had an actor come in and replace him. And that's all I will say about that, because I don't have anything else to say about that actor who came in to replace him.
And moving on.
Thank you.
Welcome. And thank you for talking about it.
Well, like I said, I'm old enough now, and I'm far enough removed from all of this that like, I don't mind, like everybody knows. I think anybody who listens to these podcasts, if anybody comes on these conversations and they're like, everything is perfect all the time and everyone gets along and it's a beautiful world, it's not true. Like, it's not true. And somewhere along the way, we lost the ability to like understand that like, just because something can be bad, it doesn't mean there are bad people involved. It's just not a good experience. Like, it was a really bad experience, I think, for everybody. But I was able to, work with Jan Maxwell, which was still to this day like one of the coolest experiences of my life, and a person who I loved with all my heart. I loved Jan Maxwell. And so even in this experience, which I would still say today is like my worst experience ever in theater, there was a beautiful, thing that came out of it, which was some of the friendships that I made with the people that were working on the show.
And she was nominated for a Tony the same year that you won. So
yeah,
look at that.
She gave me the biggest hug and like the biggest squeeze. And then the funny part about that is we actually, the two of us saw Lynn Meadow that night. And Lynn was like, hard to believe, just 4 years ago, we were all like in the state that we were in, and it was like, oh yeah, it's true. It's like funny how time changes things,
Yeah. So between To Be or Not to Be, and then Once, what happened? You came to LA to do some...
I was in a relationship. My girlfriend at the time came to LA to do Wicked. So she was out here. We moved out here. And then I was like, all right, well, I'm out here. So like, let me try to do some TV, like, let me see what that's all about. I never really like thought that I would do TV. I thought I'd always be on Broadway, and just like, oh, well, I'm the theater actor now. Like, I'm just going to do this for the rest of my life. And we didn't have any intention at the time of staying out here, but she was in the show for a while. Like, it ran out here for a while. And so, we were here. And then, as it goes, you're just out here auditioning and trying to find things. And I was out here when I got to be or not to be, to be
honest.
clear. Yeah, to be honest. So we were already living out here. So I actually went back to do that show and then came back out here after it was over. And then we were out here, I guess, for like 3 years. I was doing a sitcom on CMT. And like, I thought, well, that's it. Like, this is life, like, I'm going to just stay out here and like do TV now. And then, that brings us to, probably the biggest moment of my professional career in my life so far. Jim Carnahan, who had, I'd worked with on 110 in the Shade, and who was sort of like, if there was anybody who like, quote unquote, discovered me, then Jim Carnahan deserves all that credit, because I was at Williamstown in 2004, my second year of grad school. And he came up to see one of the shows, and I was like a small part in the show. And he had asked me afterwards, like, hey, who's your agent? And I said, well, I don't have an agent. And he was like, well, where do you, like, are you in New York? And I said, no, I'm in grad school. And he was like, oh, well, like, let me get you an agent. And I was like, okay. So he was like, well, first things, he's like, I want you to come in and audition for La Cage aux Folles. He was like, we're doing a production. We want you to come in and audition for The Sun. And I was like, okay, great. So I came in on one of my days off, did like probably like 4 or 5 auditions for that show, like 2 or 3 work sessions with Jerry Zaks. And ultimately they ended up going with Gavin Creel, which was a great decision. I went back to grad school, but then he called me and wanted me to come in for All Shook Up as well, to be the understudy in All Shook Up. But I just, at the time, I was like, you know what, like, I think I'm just going to stick out my last year in grad school and kind of like, I'm almost done. I don't really want to like, leave school for an understudy situation. So like, let me just stay in school. And I think it was Cheyenne Jackson did that, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. Was Jared Emick for a while?
Who?
Jared Emick for a while, wasn't it? Jared Emick?
I don't remember. I just know it was
the original. And then Cheyenne. Yeah.
And Gambitiste
was Jen Gambitiste, yeah.
Yeah.
So anyway, so after that, when I said I was going to go back to school, he was like, well, I want to introduce you to an agent. And so he introduced me to innovative artist, this guy named Gary Gersh. And he was like, hey, like, we'd love to represent you. And that just made life so easy for me my last year of school, because I didn't have to worry about getting an agent. I have to worry about any of that. So I kind of hit the ground running when I graduated. But so Jim Carnahan, the reason why I would say I got started in the business, calls me and is like, hey, we're doing a workshop of a new musical, and our lead actor just dropped out, and he had a prior commitment, or he got a movie or something, and so he's not able to do the workshop. And do you want to come do it? And I said, well, what is the project? And he goes, well, it's called Once. Now, I had seen the film. I had taken everybody that I knew to see that film in a little tiny theater in New York. Like, I'm talking one of those old art house theaters in New York. There's like 25 seats. I had seen the review in the New York Times, and I was like, oh, I want to see this. It sounds like something I would love. Obviously, like, changed my whole life. That seeing the movie changed my whole life. I had taken everybody that I knew and loved to see that movie. And so he called me. He was like, we're doing this workshop of it. Would you want to come do it? And I said, no, I'm not interested. And he was like, why? I said, well, I just like, I don't know. It's not for me. My agent called and was like, what are you doing? Like, why would you not do this? I was like, listen, this is my favorite movie of all time. Like, of all time. I do nothing but play these songs all the time. Like, I listen to the soundtrack constantly. I play the songs constantly. Like, I don't want to be associated with ruining the name of this movie. And to me, a Broadway version of Once the Musical, or like, Once the Musical, was going to be a disaster. Like, in my head, I thought about like, oh, there's going to be like a vacuum number, like what are they going to turn this thing into? Like, I just don't want to be a part of that, like that's not for me. So I said no.
Yeah.
Then the next day they called back and they're like, hey, like they don't have anybody. My agent was like, Jim's done a lot for you. Like, I think you should, really consider doing this. And I was like, all right, let me sleep on it. Call me tomorrow. We can talk about it. They called me the next day and I was like, I can't do it. Like, I can't do it. This is going to go so bad. And I cannot be the guy who like makes this go so bad. Another day goes by and I was supposed to be on vacation. The weekend or the week that they were doing the workshop, I was going to be on vacation anyway. And my agent called and he was like, hey, listen, like I really thought about this. I think you should do it. Jim has been great for you. He really needs this favor right now. And by the way, they'll fly you from your vacation and then back to wherever you're going to be. And also, you're not committed to doing it any further. So you just be going to do this like 4-day early, like table read workshop, right? I was like, oh God. All right, fine. Like, fine. So I go to New York to do this reading. And do you know who the original girl was? Are you that deep of a...
I'm not deep, but I would love to know.
So in the original workshop, and I'm blanking on her last name. One second. In the original workshop, I show up and it was this girl. Her name was, oh God, hold on. Why am I blanking on her last name? Nelly.
Furtado.
Not Furtado. No, the other one, the blonde like jazz singer.
Oh, shit. Oh, why can't I think of her name now?
Can't think of her last name.
Yeah, she sang songs and hold on. Now I have to like Google this because it's really going to bother me.
Yeah. Yeah, Google it.
Yeah. Well, of course, my phone is
This
having
is terrible.
Nelly.
Are we able to cut this out of the podcast?
No, it's fine. I'll figure it out. It's Nelly something.
Yeah.
Nelly singer.
Blonde hair. I think she used to do some shows at like Joe's Pub and stuff. She had like a moment. She was
Maybe
like,
it's not who I think it is. It's fine. She was a performer who was the original person.
yeah. So she was the original.
You can tell me off podcast, but I would love to know who you replaced in the workshop. But again, off podcast, if you know who it is.
Oh yeah, for sure. I can tell you. So I show up. I was like super excited to work there. And we were like playing around, and basically the first incarnation of this was just us sitting around a table. Mm-hmm. Everybody brought any instrument you had at home. So like if you have like a xylophone, if you have this, you had just bring it, So I of course just brought a guitar. We had a piano, we had some other stuff. I think we had an accordion, we had like a flute, a violin, we had all these just weird, just random instruments. And we just like played. We just kind of like played around. And there was a young person there, a young girl there. I'm not young, but she was, she seemed like a newcomer. Mm-hmm. I had never heard of her. And she was playing the ex-girlfriend. Just literally just like random small part, ex-girlfriend and like ensemble. And she was just so good at everything that I think everybody was like, this feels like the girl. Like, yeah. Like no offense to the other girl, but like this feels like the girl. Yeah. Right. So after, of course, that was Kristen Milioti. Mm-hmm. Incredible, another incredible human being, incredible talent. She, we had our last little like performance, and after 4 days of working on this thing in this very limited capacity, and having worked with John Tiffany and Enda Walsh and Martin in the sort of like 4 days of this, I was like, uh-oh, like this thing is going to really be special. Like I wasn't thinking Broadway special, but I was like, whatever tiny little off-Broadway theater this goes to, like, it's going to be special. And then my immediate thing was, okay, how do I get them to like get me to do this now? Because I had like had cold feet about it, and I was afraid they were already like looking for somebody else. So I immediately made it known. I was like, hey, like, please, like, whatever, like, let me do this. my TV show that I was on was waiting to see if it was going to get picked up for a second season. I've like never in my life rooted for a TV show to not get picked up. I was begging for this one to not get picked up because I was like, I cannot, like, this was so incredible. Like, I have to go do this. I had been home for a few weeks, got the call that the show was not getting picked up. And I was like, all right, yes, step one. Then step two happened. They called and they said, hey, we're going to do this, a workshop version of this up at ART in Boston. Would you want to do it? I immediately said yes. And then they told me the greatest news ever, which was that Kristen Milioti was going to be playing the girl. And the rest is history, but I'm sure we can like dig into it. But that's how it all kind of came about. I was out here just kicking around TV and, and did a favor to a man who I really owed a lot to, and end up owing a lot more to him for doing it, the favor.
Name your first child. No, I'm just joking.
Basically, yeah, we thought about it.
Yeah. So what's interesting too is because you did it at ART, and there's actually like in the ART archives on YouTube, there's a video of you doing Your Mind's Made Up, and it's so different from like the New York Theater Workshop.
So different, isn't it?
Yeah. And it's just your face like right up into the microphone as I like hide my face pretending it's a microphone. So ART, you did it. Did you guys have any inkling that it was coming to New York? Did you know it was coming to New York? How did New York?
We all understood that New York Theater Workshop was an option because they were all coming up to see the show, and I had been around enough to know that New York Theater Workshop's here a lot, that I think they definitely like had an eye on it. They came up to see the show. We did it where they do the Donkey Show, which is such a small, tiny little space. Like, it was so intimate. And, so in my mind, it was just sort of stretched for that stage, well, we're only going to do this in like this kind of space in New York. Obviously, New York Theater Workshop's the perfect space for that. I don't remember when exactly we found out about New York Theater Workshop, but I don't think it was during that reading. Probably the coolest thing that happened during that whole time, I mean, first of all, just like the experience of being with that cast of people, everybody with instruments every day, just playing music, really just like playing music together. It felt like we were in a band, and I joke about it all the time. Like, we were a band in a lot of ways. We had everything that a band has, like we were like Fleetwood Mac. Like, we had it was high drama, high reward, high risk, high love, high celebration, high joy, high fun. It was just, everything was at 1,000,000%, and it was an incredible, just 4 or 5 weeks, I think we were there. Then on the last show, they were like, hey, so Glenn might be coming to one of these shows, and they were like, so I think he's coming tonight. Like, I mean, for me, you might as well have told me like that Paul McCartney was going to be in the front row. I was just like, I had been so obsessed with Glenn since seeing that movie. And he came, and like any normal person, they would have put him in the back, because it's a small place anyway. Like, let's put him in the back and like let him get comfortable or whatever. No, they put him like right dead front center, like right in the front row, center of the row. So we start the show and he's just there. Like, he's just there. And I was just like lost. I just out of body experience. I don't remember anything about the performance. I don't remember anything at all. I just remember after the show, him coming up and just going like, hey, fair play, fair play. And I was like, oh, thanks. And then they were like, hey, Glenn, do you want to like play with us? And he grabbed a guitar, and then we just sat and jammed around for like an hour or 2 hours. And there's some pictures of it, and I'm always like in the background, just like holding onto my guitar, just like watching. Like, I was so like enthralled and enamored and just sort of like, again, out of my body, that I couldn't even play. I was just like watching the cast play with him and watching him be there. And just, again, like, I know, I promise you, this is not something I say all the time, but like in retelling all this, each time these things happened, I just never felt like I deserved to be there. I was like, well, this doesn't make any sense. Like, why am I here? Why am I the guy with the guitar standing next to Glenn Hansard? Like, why is this happening? You know? And that was no different, that experience. And then I think we were back, I think I was back out here, just back to like life as normal in Los Angeles, waiting to hear what was going to happen. And then we found out we were going to New York Theater Workshop. I obviously like jumped at the chance. My partner at the time, she had just booked a show. She had just booked Smash. I think everybody knows it was Megan Hilty. I don't know if that's like a pretty common knowledge. We were together for quite some time. So she had just booked Smash, which was going to be shooting in New York. So we packed up and we moved back to New York. And we started rehearsals and production on Once in the fall of 2011. And yeah, so then that catches us up to like when you came to see the show, which was that
All about
early.
me just seeing the show. That's what it was leading up to.
Yeah. No, but you know what I'm saying? That's where we're at now. Is like, we're at New York Theater Workshop. It's super intimate.
Yeah.
It was an incredible experience.
Yeah.
For me personally, I had grown up as such like a Rent fanatic,
Mm-hmm.
that to be in that space,
Yeah.
doing that show was just like, it's like otherworldly to me. I was like, this is hallowed ground. And now we're doing, this little show that, all of a sudden it's like impossible to get a ticket to. And there's lines of people outside just trying to get in to see it, at an off-Broadway, like tiny little show. And soon you start hearing the, people talking about it. And you're like, oh, like I'm in that show. Oh shit, I'm in that show, Yeah.
Yeah. So like I told you before we started, and I've mentioned it so many times already on the podcast, like when I saw the show, I got the flyer in the mail because I am a fan of yours. I'm like, well, if I don't use this flyer, I'm never going to see the show and Steve Kazee in it. I think I was
Right.
like,
Because there's no way that show's going to Broadway, right? You had to
well,
have thought that in.
well, no, I thought like, yeah, it'll come to Broadway, but like, it's very rare that I'll do like I'll go somewhere to see like an out of town tryout of a show, or like I'll see something off Broadway. Like, it's very rare at the time that I've done that. And I was like, let me just see this, because sometimes, you think a show is going to come to Broadway and just like won't happen.
Yeah.
But I saw it on a matinee. Maybe it was like a Saturday. I sat maybe like second or third. I was like very close to the stage. And I just remember at the end of Act One being like, wow, literally said that out loud. Went to the box office. I actually ended up getting a student ticket because I still had my college student ID that I could get away with. Can't anymore. And then I bought a ticket to see it a second time. And, like I told you, I saw the show. Nobody applauded throughout like the entire first act, which we can discuss your feelings about. And I saw like a third time, I think like New Year's Eve. And I was like, I need to buy a ukulele. The show has inspired me to play an instrument. And then I went into the music store and I didn't buy one. But no, that show, that show changed my life in a way that I can't really explain. And I saw it like 7 times on Broadway. Like I even won tickets to see it when like Marquetta was at the show, like later on in the run to perform after.
Yeah.
I told you I
Yeah.
was the first night of previews, and that to me, like I'm getting emotional talking about it now. Just like, and I tell the story to everybody, like, the actors come out on stage, they bow, they leave, they come out, they bow again, lights go up. Nobody in the audience wanted to leave. And I made sure when I saw it first night of previews, I got like a very good seat. I was maybe like second or third row, center orchestra, because again, I'm crying. I'm so sorry. But the show meant so much to me. And like having you on the podcast to talk about it really means a lot. Sorry, I'm crying. But I'm curious to know, like, with you doing the show, when we talked about like your feelings about, it took a moment for the actors to figure out like nobody applauding. What with that, like, also like first night of previews, having clearly the reaction that I am having right now talking to you, but it being like 10 times more like on Broadway first night of previews, and bringing the show and having people just go crazy for it.
Yeah. I was definitely the first time in my life where like just people just didn't applaud. Like it was just deadly silent, after a musical number would end. And from the actor perspective, or from the artist perspective, you're, especially with that show, like I'm putting everything I got into those songs every time we do them, you know, and I mean like the bottom of the barrels, I'm putting it in there, you know, and then it would just be silent, and it took a few times to be like, oh, what's going on? Like, I mean, is this bad? Like, because this was our first time in front of like a big audience. I mean, a big audience, but like an audience, you know, and people were just silent. And it took a little time to understand, like, oh no, they're just like they can't clap. Like they're like, they just can't clap. Like they're kind of just like waiting, you know, or they're so sort of like moved that they like can't, like they're just awestruck, you know. And once that happened, I think there was a real sense of pride, you know, of like, oh, like we've got a really special thing here. Like I've certainly never seen a show where that had happened. And I definitely had never been in a part of a show where that had happened. I mean, I'd been in shows where nobody's clapped or laughed, but it was not for the reasons that was happening. So, you know, that was, I think once that kind of set in for us and we all could just relax into doing the show, just got better and better. Like that was a show where it got better every time we did it.
Yeah.
And I fully believe that. I fully believe that, like, whenever my last show was, it was probably the best show that, you know, I had, because I just felt like every time we got tighter as a group, and every time the songs got better, and like, you know, and not to like toot my own horn, but I think that's, you know, that's saying something, because they were always just incredible from day one. And so to feel like they got better and better along the way, I think just speaks to the talent and the heart of that cast, especially that cast, the original cast of that show. Just that, you know, I used to call us like the island of misfit toys. Like we were all in our own way, like we brought something very unique to this group, and it just made for beautiful music. You know, it's like having a bunch of like strange notes make a beautiful symphony, you know. And I, you know, I get emotional about it as well, because it was just, no pun intended, it was a once in a lifetime, and it makes it really hard to like ever think about coming back and doing something else, because I just know it won't be anywhere near that, you know, because it's a lightning in a bottle situation, you know.
So, I mean, as I sit here getting over crying, excuse me as I wipe my tears.
No, please.
What was the first night of previews on Broadway like for you guys, having witnessed me and many other audience members just like not leaving, and you guys have forced out to another curtain call?
It was, God, you know, it's always so hard to talk about this time, because I think what a lot of people don't understand, and you know, I'm in the process of writing a book, and a lot of this will be in that book, because I think what a lot of people don't understand is that time in life for me was a very difficult time. I know that there was, you know, it was in the press after my mom died a lot, you know, but there was a real lead up to that happening. It wasn't just like, oh, my mom passed away one night. You know, it was an ongoing thing for like my entire journey with Once was going like this, and my going up, you know, like an upward trajectory, and my mother's life was on a downward trajectory. And those are two worlds that I couldn't really separate, you know. And so I was living fully in both of those worlds, which was very difficult. It was very difficult. I didn't even know how difficult at the time. It's only been years later that I've unpacked a lot of it. So that first preview was, you know, in a lot of ways, it was like a very cathartic experience. It was an accomplishment that I never assumed we would even go to Broadway. I mean, I used to tell everybody, well, this isn't going to go to Broadway. You know, I mean, it's like, it's going to be at New York Theater Workshop. It's like never going to go to Broadway. It's too small. Like we can't, this show's not, people are not going to come see this in a, you know, 1,200 seat house. Like, it's just not going to happen. Like, this is going to be an incredible run at New York Theater Workshop. You know, we'll probably like be remembered as this like great little, like, you know, niche show, and then it'll all be gone. Mm-hmm. So there we were, you know, on Broadway, putting the show on. And it was just like, it was a real emotional release for me that night. And then it was also like this impending terror of like, all right, we're on Broadway, like, and now there's all the things that come with that, and there's all the sort of, extracurriculars that come that, can be a little daunting at times. And so it was a real immediate release, and then a real immediate like snap back to like, all right, like this is the beginning, not the end,
Yeah.
Yeah.
I do remember when it was announced that it was going to Broadway, I was just like, oh, I hope it doesn't lose the intimacy that it had at New York Theater Workshop. And I don't want to say weirdly, like it didn't, it just worked.
It didn't. And, that so much of that credit goes to John Tiffany and Enda and Martin and the entire creative team, to be honest, because from ART to New York Theater Workshop to the Jacobs on Broadway, they always knew the exact way to just make that show expand a little and fill the space that it was in without ever becoming something else.
Yeah.
The show that you saw on Broadway is the show that we were doing at ART, but it just expanded. It like its heart grew a little bit. It didn't change, little things, little tweaks here and there. Like we used to do an encore song at New York Theater Workshop. We cut that out on Broadway because like it just didn't feel right. It felt a little hokey. It didn't feel like true to what we were doing. It felt so much more valid and honest to just leave the show where it was, with that last moment. And so those little things changed, but John and the creatives, they just had a way of just expanding the heart of the show. And so when we got to Broadway and it sort of took off in the way it did, it's like a real testament to them, because they really guided the ship in such a beautiful way and trusted all of us to, stay on board and to just do the job that was being asked of us, and I think everybody in the show just like, did their job in such a beautiful way that it was all tied together. It's like, it's like a guitar that's like super in tune, it's like every string was just playing at the right frequency every night and just made this beautiful noise,
I do agree.
Really, really special.
I do agree with the magic that is John Tiffany, because his production of Glass Menagerie, I don't know if you saw it. It was incredible. Like she comes out of the couch and, because it's a memory play, it's on like this black liquid, the stage, and the amount of time people touch said liquid when they weren't supposed to. It's a show I worked merch at. So yeah.
And I think in a lot of ways, ours was a memory play as well. We talked about that a lot. It's like, it's not happening in real time. We're seeing flashbacks and we're seeing these moments. We're seeing little snapshots of people's lives, but like it starts as a memory,
I never thought of it that way.
So Guy comes out on the stage and they're all in this pub and they're all singing songs and they say, do you have a song? And he's like, yeah, here's my song. And then it fades into that memory of her coming and like hearing him play that song. And then we're just on that journey. But like, the real beginning of the show is just a pub full of people like singing and drinking and playing songs. And then I walk in and they're like, hey, do you have a song to play? And I'm like, boy, do I ever, so like the song is the show, I'll sing you this whole song of like this story that happened between me and this girl, basically.
I'm not going to lie to you, Steve, my mind has just been completely blown.
Yeah.
Like all these years later, I'm like, holy shit. Like it's a memory play. Wow.
Yeah.
Magic and memories. John
That's why you never saw Kristen. Kristen was never out there in the pre-show.
Wow.
Just comes on after the lights go down.
My mind is completely like fucking blown right now in a good way.
Yeah.
So let's talk quickly because we have a lot of other things to talk about and we have a little bit less time than we did before, but let's talk about Tony night really quickly for you because you were nominated not against, but like you had like Audra there, you had Mike Nichols there that night, you had Maxwell. So what was the Tony experience like for you?
Tony's was a
And
really
it's Bergen
incredible.
giving you your Tony. Sorry.
Yeah, yeah,
I just want to say really quickly, because I was thinking about this leading up to this interview, and I remember sitting in the merch office of Mamma Mia and having like a heavy debate with people about what song you guys were going to perform at the Tonys. And I said,
hmm
they're going to perform Gold. They can't perform Gold. Kristen's not featured in it. Like, they're going to do Falling Slowly. I'm like, why are they going to do Falling Slowly when they literally have done it for like every television appearance that
yeah,
they've done? I'm like, I guarantee you they're doing Gold. And then you have
yeah,
like Josh Groban introducing you guys. And
yeah.
I was like, called it.
Yeah. Yeah. You did call it. And that was the reasoning too. It was like we had done the Falling Slowly thing so much. It was like, let's give them a little taste of something else.
Yeah.
And, it's hard because other than Falling Slowly, there wasn't really a song that Kristen and I did together.
Yeah.
Um, we tried to feature her as much as possible, like, bringing her up on the bar at the end of it, like all of that, like, just really making sure she was seen as like because she was such that show is the definition of a two-hander, like there is no guy without girl, there is no girl without guy in that show. And so, you have to make decisions sometimes based on that. And that's exactly what it was. It was just that we had done Falling Slowly on basically every other thing.
Mm.
Um, Tony night, it was, well, first of all, like, it was such a, as because you're a fan of theater, you know how it goes. Like, you get nominated for an Outer Critics, then you get nominated for a Drama Desk, and then you get nominated for a Tony. And like, whoever usually wins the Outer Critics and the Drama Desk usually wins the Tony. And that's just the way it goes. That was not how it went for us. It was very strange because, like, I don't think people really knew what to do with us in the beginning. Like, I think people who like really appreciated it, but I think, like, so Outer Critics, I think I got nominated for, but Drama Desk, we didn't get nominated. Like, neither Kristen or I got nominated, and we were like, oh, okay, like, I guess we're not, like, okay, cool, like, no big deal. Then we both get nominated for the Tonys, but it just felt like, like, oh well, like, we're the little show that, like, we're the little art show of the year, and we're not going to be able to compete against like Newsies and all these other things. And so, like, let's just be happy with what we are. And like, I had a real, I'm just happy to be here vibe. Obviously, like I've said a billion times in this podcast, is that I never really felt like I deserved to be there anyway. So everything was a bonus. And that felt like a bonus too, of like, holy shit, like, I was nominated for this, I was nominated for that. Like, this is, it's the old joke of like, it's just an honor to be nominated. It really was. It was like an honor to be a part of that group of people. Also, because for whatever reason, like, some of my closest people in life were all floating around in that season, so you had Mike Nichols, you had Jan Maxwell, Audra McDonald, James Corden, Christian Borle. So James and I, going back to Spamalot, and all those boys from History Boys, we would always go over to Angus after the show and just sit and like have beers until like 1 or 2 in the morning. Like, we were such good friends with that cast because History Boys was just right there on the corner with us. So like that night, to see Audra and James and myself and Nina Arianda, who I had known at grad school and was a friend of mine, she, it was just like,
Yeah.
just this night of like, none of this makes sense, and we all won. And like, but for me, I remember the thought of like sitting out there, and just the only thing I wanted to have happen was for her to say my name right. Because it had been such a letdown before. And I thought, well, I'm going to lose this. I won't say who I thought I was going to lose to, but I definitely thought I was going to lose. And I was okay with it. I made peace with it. Because like, I was just really proud of the show, and I was proud of what we had all done. But I just didn't expect it. And so when she said my name, the first thing that I thought was, oh God, she said my name right. Thank God. Right. And then all of a sudden I remember, I was like, wait, she just said my name again. Like, why did she say my name twice? That's what's going on in my brain, is like, oh God. And then it just hit me. And I think I remember I just like, I dropped my head. And then I just was thinking to myself, like, I'm never going to get through this. I'm never going to make it through this. And I got up there and I looked out, and randomly, way in the back, I saw a friend of mine who I had done theater with like years ago, before any of this, and she was just going crazy, like losing her mind. And I think that it just hit me, of how real the moment was. Cause like, obviously you look down and you see Hugh Jackman and you see all the people in the front, and like, you're like, oh, this is incredible. Like, wow, what a cool experience. But then you see a person that really knows you and who knew you like a long time ago. And it just kind of locked it in for me. And then, I fumbled my way. I don't even know what I was saying. I didn't have anything planned. And so I haven't watched it back in a very long time. My stepdaughter wanted to watch it once, and so I showed it to her. But that was a while ago. But I don't remember much about the speech. I just remember feeling so grateful and feeling like I'd always wanted to feel like a part of that community. Because when I found theater in college, I found myself. And then I had always just felt a little bit like an outsider. Like I didn't feel like I belonged anywhere. And winning that award felt like, oh, this is a recognition that like I belong here, And I probably would have felt it just having done the show and been nominated, but something about winning that night really made me feel like I belonged. And, and then of course, all of the things about my mom passing came up because, her thing always with me was just like, you belong anywhere, like you belong wherever you are. And she used to say, and I said that in a speech, she would always tell me before every show, like, go stand up there and show them whose little boy you are. And so, it was just really a really powerful moment and a really emotional moment. And then it was just a blur after that. And then, the joke is that then you go back to your show the next night and nobody gives a shit. It's like the audience for the most part doesn't know. Sometimes depending on like if it's a real sort of like, like deep theater crowd, the show gets extra applause because it won the Tony the night before, but we didn't have any of that. It was just like, it felt like another night at once, people really enjoying the show. And then we were just into the run of it, then it just became like, okay, we're doing once. And it was beautiful and it was wonderful. And we could finally kind of like relax a little bit on all the like promotional things that you have to do. Cause people don't understand this. Like anybody's listening to this, who's outside of this, world, it's like running for president. There's so much that goes into it when you're trying to sell your show to Tony voters and sell your performance to Tony voters. I mean, Kristen and I were, and Elizabeth were exhausted almost every night for that like 2 or 3 months, because you're just going to an event with like 400 voters beforehand and playing a couple of songs from the show and then going to the show. And then the next day you got to go to the View. And then it's just like, it's really a lot of work. So once that was all said and done, we were able to kind of, I think, relax into the show a little bit. Unfortunately for myself, I basically like went into like the deepest depression of my life. And then there was a very strange juxtaposition of like being the most successful I had ever been, but also the most depressed I had ever been, and trying to reconcile that and trying to survive that was a bigger accomplishment for me than even winning the Tony, because it got hairy for a little while. If I'm being completely honest, it was a very tough thing to do, to pull yourself up every night and go do a show when like, your whole world was basically had disappeared and was just sort of like in shambles, so, yeah.
Well, I feel like we should talk about something happier now.
Listen,
Yeah.
I don't have a problem with it. I actually think it's an important part of the story, to be honest, because it's just easy to talk about how great everything was and what a success it was and how beautiful it all was, because it was all of that.
Yeah.
But it was also, for me, a very difficult time. And I don't think anybody really had a full understanding at the time that that was the way it was, because I'm a very good actor at hiding it,
Yeah.
you know, and pushing through.
Yeah.
But it was tough, you know, and by the end of my run there, I was so worn out emotionally and physically and mentally. And then, you know, I think my body just said, like, enough, you
Yeah.
know, like enough. I was really just like, I was just gassed in a lot of ways. And yeah, probably could have come back to the show at a certain point, but it just didn't feel like it was a smart move for, you
Mhm.
know, my mental health.
Well, like you said earlier when you did the other show that we shall not mention again, how one of the actors left and you realized later on that you have to take care of yourself. And I do agree
Yeah.
with that, because I've always said, like, you can't take care of anything or anyone else or anything unless you take care of yourself first. And I think that is
Yeah.
very important. It's an important lesson. So thank you for sharing all of
Yeah, of
that.
course.
And
Well, I
also,
think there's a bit of unfortunately, I think there's like a little bit of a false narrative out there, because so the thing that happened was I went on vacation because I had re-signed for, I think, either 6 or maybe even 9 months. I was going to extend my contract for like 9 months.
mhm,
So they gave me a vacation as part of that like negotiation.
mhm.
So I went to Puerto Rico for a week by myself, didn't talk to anybody, just chilled out, hung out on the beach, like quiet, super quiet. Came back, and my first show back, I went to my voice lesson that morning, came to the show, my first show back, like halfway during, uh, was it Say It To Me Now? I just felt like, oh man, I'm getting hoarse. Like, this is weird. Like, I don't know why I'm getting hoarse all of a sudden. And then by When Your Mind's Made Up, I had barely any voice left. And I managed to kind of like limp vocally through the rest of the show. Got up the next morning, went to my voice lesson, got warmed up, came to the show, and it just was like not going to happen. And I didn't miss very many shows. I probably less than, you know, 5 or 6 before that moment. So in the year that I had been there, probably missed, like, I had a couple of personal days, you know, but never for like, oh, I couldn't do the show. And all of a sudden I was in this place of like, oh, I can't do the show today. I went to my ENT, you know, she scoped me and everything looked good, except for one of my vocal cords had like a little bit of a swelling, and it was right near a blood vessel. And so she was like, hey, listen, like, let's don't push this. Like, I want that swelling to go down because it's too close to a blood vessel. And if that does rupture, then you're looking at a whole bad situation of like surgery and all this stuff. So she was like, so let's just put you on a couple of weeks of vocal rest, and then let's reevaluate.
Mhm.
So I like went on vocal rest, go back for the reevaluation, and she was like, so look, the swelling is down. But like, my professional advice is like, this show is very difficult to sing. And if this is the show that you're going to be singing for another 9 months, like, I can't promise that you're not going to do permanent damage. You know, it's just a tough show to sing. And that, in conjunction with, I think, where I was mentally at the time, which was low, like very, very low. Um, I was just like, I don't know if I'll survive this, to be honest. And I'm not being hyperbolic about it. Like, I don't know if I would have survived it. And so I wasn't able to like go and finish the show. But then the narrative that came out was like, oh, he like ruined his voice or destroyed his voice. He can never sing again. He can never do this again. And that just wasn't true, you know? And it was like a weird time because you don't want to come out and like do an interview and try to like reassure people that you're fine. So it was just like, you know, I wasn't I wasn't able to come out and be honest and be like, you know, hey, like, I'm suffering. My mental health is struggling right now. Nowadays, if you do that, you know, 10 years later, people are like, oh my God, like, thank you for like bringing this topic to light. But back then it wasn't that way. It was very much like you put your head down and you go out and you give your all to the audience, because like, that's what your job is. And you do 8 shows a week and you just push through. And that's just like the grind, you know? So if I could have been more honest at the time, I think I would have just tried to let people know, like, hey, I'm not well right now. You
Yeah.
know, I'm like really not well, and I need some help, and I need to kind of like figure this out, you know. And thankfully, I was able to like go and do that. It took some time, took a lot of time actually. But eventually I was able to like, process and work through a lot of this stuff and kind of like find my feet again. I think the people that don't know the full story don't understand that like my mom and I had such a difficult life together growing up. We struggled a lot and went through a lot of things that when she passed away, it was like my life ended as well. And then I was a person that like didn't have any sense of like who they were in the world. And then I had one side of the world telling me that I was this thing. And then this other thing that I knew myself to be had kind of died with my mom. And I just got into this place of like having to find out who I really was. And at the age of 36 is a difficult thing to do for anybody, on top of having lost the most important person in the world to me. And so it just was a recipe for absolute abject failure and disaster. That it took me a long time to like put the pieces together, but utterly and completely necessary, which is why my book is called Thanks for Dying, because I really credit my mom's death with like forcing me to have to really deal with some of those things that I had not dealt with up until that point in my life. And once that happened, I was able to like now have the life that I've always wanted to have. It took a minute.
Yeah.
So anyway.
Ask about your book pretty quickly, or are you not able
to? Sure.
So is this like an autobiographical book? Is this like a help book?
Yeah.
What type of book is it?
It's a little bit of both. It's a memoir about basically, so the initial title before I pared it down, the initial title was Dear Mom, Thanks for Dying, A Guide to Grief and Grieving, right? Because it was, for me, it was going to be about like, hey, the grieving process was so difficult for me, and none of the like things that they tell you to do work, right? And the secret at the end of the day is like there is no secret. Like grief is just it's a kaleidoscope. It's different for everybody. It doesn't have a timeline. It doesn't feel one way. There's not a formula. It's never going to work. Like, so it was just like the book is like, this was my experience and the things that I went through. And if you can find things in there that help you in these moments, if there are lessons for you along the way, then great. But it's by no means like a self-help book. It's more of like, how I helped myself book.
Yeah.
Kind of thing. But it's a memoir. It's about, how I got to the places that I was and how I got to the places that I am, basically. But it's all centered around not just my mom, but a lot of heavy loss that I've had in the past like 10 years.
Well, when it comes out, you're more than welcome to come back on and discuss it.
Yeah, we'll have for sure.
And I'm very serious about that. So very quickly, because we only have a few minutes left, I would love to talk about.
We can push it to like 12:15.
Okay, great.
Yeah.
Your time, because I'm in New York. So
yeah.
So I would look, because I always say, like, I don't remember who said it. It was probably Betty White, who you were lucky enough to meet at The View, because again, I did go back and rewatch Guitar Hero during my research of you. You did get to meet Betty White at The View, which you're very lucky to have done. Why I totally lost my train of thought here. So I think she was the one who said, I don't like how people say guilty pleasure because things that give you pleasure shouldn't be guilty.
Yeah.
But that being said, Pretty Woman the musical is my guilty pleasure musical. I saw it many times on Broadway. It was the reason I got to meet Adam Pascal, and I cried like a baby after. He even signed my CD of his that I got when I was in 8th grade. So how did Pretty Woman the musical come to you?
Pretty Woman, it was well, I had kind of like gotten to a place where I was missing theater. I was missing Broadway a little bit. And I did a workshop of The Sting, the musical The Sting. And then right after that, I did a musical workshop of Pretty Woman. And at the time, Pretty Woman was guaranteed to come to Broadway. Sting was only going to Paper Mill. And so I thought, well, let me go with Pretty Woman and like, let's see where this goes. So I went and did the Chicago production, and this is one of those stories where uh, it just was a bad fit. Like ultimately, it was just a bad fit. It wasn't. I wasn't what I don't think I was what they had in mind, and I don't think the show was what I had in mind.
Mm.
And I had come into it thinking that they were going to maybe do like a little bit different take on it. But soon realized it was basically just going to be like the movie, and like that's fine, and that works for a lot of people, but it wasn't going to work for me in particular. And then I don't know that maybe they would say this, maybe they wouldn't say this. I'd have to ask them, but like I just don't think I was it for them. Does that make sense? Like I don't know if they were happy with like what I was bringing to the show. It just was a bad fit. And the PC thing that you say and do is like, well, it didn't work out, and like creative differences or all that, but it just was just a bad fit. I loved everybody involved on that show, and I was rooting for that show so hard, which is why I didn't talk about that show in any way, or talk about leaving that show in any way, because I wouldn't have never wanted to do any sort of damage to that show while it was running and having people that I love be a part of it. But it just wasn't for me. And I love that people love it, and I love that people enjoyed it, and it had a life on Broadway. But it was just a bad fit. I think it was just a bad fit. And it's tricky, and it's hard because I have a lot of respect for the people involved in it, but sometimes you just don't work well with certain people, and you don't really speak the same language. And there are times where I've found where you work with people, and you're the one that's not speaking the right language. And like, maybe that was this case. I don't know if it was, but it's possible. Like maybe I was the one who was speaking French and everybody else was speaking English. I've had scenarios where like I'm speaking German, they're speaking English, but for some reason it works and the show is incredible. This one was not that way. Like I didn't really feel like I was understood, and I didn't really feel like I was, appreciated, or, it didn't feel to me much like a collaboration. So there were problems, to begin with, but unfortunately, the home that my father lived in also had a fire, and he lost everything. And it happened right around the time that Pretty Woman in Chicago ended. And so the most logical thing to do at that time was to just, excuse myself. And I had other things that I really wanted to like focus my energy on. And like I talked about earlier, and it came up, and once it came up here, you got to take care of yourself, because nobody else is going to, no one else is going to be concerned about, where you are. No one is going to be concerned about what you're going through. And they were incredible. Like I will say this much: the production team was incredible. The producers were incredible. They helped out so much. When my dad's house burned, they were just wonderful human beings, and none of it was personal. It was, every bit of it was just a professional, like, bad fit. I have tremendous respect for Jerry Mitchell and Paula Wagner. Everybody involved in that show, I have like the utmost respect for. It just was a bad fit, and it happens. Like it happens. I was so grateful and so like thrilled that Andy was able to do the show, because what I would have felt, I think more than anything, I would have felt horrible if like they were in a pinch and couldn't really find somebody. But Andy, I think, had done a pilot that didn't get picked up, and so he was available. And to me, Andy was an incredible choice for that role, and like probably should have been it from the beginning, if I'm being completely honest. Like I have no problem saying that. Like I think he probably should have been the guy from the get-go. So it ultimately went the way that it should have. But as far as a guilty pleasure, it's not one of mine in that sense, because it was a tough experience. Yeah. But I'm so happy that it was that it had the life that it had, because so many people who I know and love were part of that show and got the experience of like being on Broadway and being involved and like seeing it all come to fruition, and the cast recording and all of it. So it was some really, really incredible people and talented people. And I wanted the best for the show. I wanted way more for that show than I think it ended up getting. But I wanted way more flowers for it and for people involved in it. But it's the nature of the business. You just never know what's going to hit and what's not. So
I will say they
that
had
was my time pretty well.
that was and see. Well, I will say they had like one brilliant piece of merch where they actually sold the cast recording as a cassette tape as well.
Oh, nice.
It was kind of brilliant. So another theater piece you have done out in LA was Love Actually Live. Do you want to talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, it was a cool experience. I mean, it's an ambitious experience, and I think he's still the producer. I think he's still in the process of trying to get something done with it, but it's tough because it's like the licensing and the rights and everything to do like a musical concert version of the show. It was tough, and what we were doing is we were putting the movie, like pieces of the movie, up on stage and then performing scenes and songs from it. So it was a cool experience. It was a cool like way to try to kind of like come about that process. It wasn't really a musical. It was more of a staged concert film version. But it was a fun experience. I think I did it twice, and loved it both times. I played the Colin Firth role and got to sing some of the beautiful songs from it. And yeah, it was a cool experience. And that company, it's a very well-known company here on the West Coast, called For the Record. And they do a lot of really interesting things where they'll like stage the works of Quentin Tarantino. So they'll do all the soundtracks from Tarantino movies, or Baz Luhrmann. They do a lot of different cool little shows. And for out here, we don't have a dearth of theatrical productions happening. So it was a cool thing to be a part of, and it was a really sort of innovative thing to be a part of. So it was fun. It was just like, it was a little bit of soup for the soul, when you're missing performing and missing theater. Because the truth is, I don't really do much anymore. Like I don't really perform that much. It's been a long time. Mm-hmm. I don't even really play guitar much anymore. I had my first kid back in 2020, and then the pandemic happened, and I've basically just been in full dad, family mode since then. And I think that's what it needed to be. I was right before the pandemic. A little bit of trivia. I actually did the workshop of A Beautiful Noise, playing Neil Diamond, and loved it. Like had such a great time on it, was really hoping that was going to be the thing that brought me back to Broadway. And then of course, like months later, we're in the pandemic and everything changed. And then once they got started again, Will Swenson came on, who did an incredible job and still doing an incredible job. But that's the last hint of any sort of future possible Broadway anything. It's been pretty quiet, partly I think because I've just been gone for so long, to be honest. I think it's a little bit out of sight, out of mind. And then the other part of it is like, I've just been so focused on being, in my family and, my wife and kids. I have a beautiful stepdaughter and my son. And, we live out here and we live in a quiet little suburb, and, we've been living that life for a few years. And so it's only been recently that I've been really feeling like I'm ready to come back and ready to be in that community. And I've always missed it. But I just haven't had the thing come along to like bring me back yet, if that makes sense. Would love to find that thing. I know we were talking a little bit before we came on about what that thing might be. I mean, here's a little juicy bit of trivia that nobody knows. Before this was like maybe a year and a half ago, Michael Arden, who I think we talked about a little bit, who's one of my best friends in the world, he and I were talking about a Sweeney Todd revival. And we were going to try to get Catherine Hahn to play Mrs. Lovett.
Wow.
Myself playing Sweeney. And it was maybe like 3 months after we had started talking about this that they announced the Josh Groban. I was like, no. I mean, I'm so happy because I love Josh and like he's incredible, and Anna Lee obviously is like a perfect choice for that role. But you know, like we were really excited about it, and then just like, you know, you get beat to the punch.
I
How
just,
are we to know someone else was already working on it?
that's like brilliant casting as like Catherine Hahn as Mrs. Lovett. Like that, wow.
Yeah, can you imagine? It would
Yeah.
have been
Well,
so good.
well, speaking of like what's going to bring you back, as I told
Yeah,
you before we started, I do ask about like any dream roles or projects that
yeah,
you hope to do other than like Sweeney Todd with Michael Arden and Catherine Hahn. Do you have,
yeah,
like anything else? I mean, I did mention one to you with Michael Arden, just so you can be like, oh, hey, I was thinking about this.
yeah. Well, there's City of Angels, which I've always felt like, you know, needs a revival. It's been so long, actually. Um, but I don't know. I struggle with this a lot because I'm at this place now, where, you know, I don't want to say like I'm not fully out of like, you know, my like leading man days, but like I'm in this weird place, you know, of like I'm in my mid 40s, and there's a lot of, you know, great roles in your 30s. And in your 40s, you kind of start trying to figure things out. Like, well, what are some good roles for like, you know, someone my age and someone, you know, my type. And so there's just like, there's not a ton of things to do, you know, like the Titanic that's going to City Center. Like I'd love to do Titanic, but I'm way too old for Barrett at this point, you know, like, so I've kind of like, I've typed out of a lot of the roles that I wish I could have played. I would have killed to be Bobby and Company at some point in my life. I would have like, you know,
Well, they,
loved.
they could have done like they could have, you could still do Company. They just age up the character. Just like,
I mean, it's like pretty hard to be like, you're almost 50, Bobby. Like,
well, look how long it took Clooney to get married. So everyone thought he was going to be a bachelor, and then he met this like incredible woman. My
yeah.
favorite joke is from the Golden Globes a couple of years ago when Amy Poehler and Tina Fey hosted, and they were like, George Clooney is getting the Cecil B. DeMille Award. George Clooney married Amal Alamuddin, and they just like listed all of her credits, and they're like, so tonight her husband is getting the award. So yeah.
Yeah, yeah, for sure. Yeah, so like I don't know. There's not really anything that jumps out at me at the moment of like, oh, that would be a role that I would love to play, because I do feel like I'm just a little too old to play a lot of them. I always wanted to do Assassins, and I never got the chance to do Assassins. I've always wanted to do some Sondheim. And you know, that was a hard part coming off of Once, is like people like don't really think of me as being someone who's like could do classical musical theater, you know, but like that's where I started. That's like where I cut my teeth. Just happened to be that Once was like something that I did, you know, like in my normal life was just play guitar and sing. So it worked out. But
Yeah.
um thought about recently like a revival of the Fantastics, but I don't know. I don't
Mhm.
know if that would work these days. But a little bit of trivia. I did the Fantastics before at a summer stock theater with Andrew Rannells
Wow.
and Jen Gambitis before either of them had ever done anything on Broadway, before any of us had. We were all babies. This was in 1998, I
Wow.
think, 8 or 99, at the New London Barn Theater. Me, Andrew
Look at
Reynolds,
where you
Jen
guys are
Gambitis,
now. Yeah.
and the Fantastics.
Yeah. Well,
So yes, I'm open to suggestions. I just
dinner
don't
with
know.
I look at the play Dinner with Friends.
Dinner with Friends. Is it a
Mhm.
play or a musical?
Play.
Play.
Dr.
I see. I'd
Margaret.
love to come back and do a play.
Yeah.
Like that would be
So
incredible.
during the pandemic, I directed virtual play readings, and I did Dinner with Friends, and I always made lists of people for different roles if we couldn't get someone, and you were on my list. But
Oh,
we got
thank you.
we got the person who was on who.
Yeah, you got the A choice. That's fine. I lived my life being a B choice. It's totally fine.
Well, no, I was like Steve Kazee, but like we did things and I couldn't like we didn't find anything. Like I really wanted to work with you, but like we just didn't. We ended up doing like a bunch of Labute stuff like towards the
Yeah.
end of the pandemic anyway. So
Yeah.
you know, anyway, it doesn't matter.
Yeah.
But yeah, I would look at Dinner with Friends. It's a really great play too, and it's like age appropriate and
Yeah.
yeah, and they
I think
also
that's the thing, is just waiting to find that thing,
yeah.
It's just a waiting game. It's
Or
also, look, there's something to be said about the fact that Broadway has changed a lot since I was there 10 years ago.
yes.
And in for the good, by the way. But it changing for the good has also, like, it limits, I think, the type of roles that, were prevalent before, that were easy to just go slide into. And so now you just have to be a little bit more patient, for the right thing to come along. And like I said, it changed for all the right reasons.
Yeah.
But it's just not, there just hasn't been a thing recently that, like, I'm right for, like we were talking about, like, if you go back since Once and just look at all the shows that came in and all, there wasn't really anything that, like, I could have, like, been in, or that I think would have been right for, Pretty Woman. I don't know if I was right for that, I thought the sting that we did at the Play Mill or Paper Mill and Playhouse was really good. But it just didn't, it didn't really ever kind of have legs beyond that, but that would have been a great fun thing to do.
Yeah.
So, I don't know, like, I just talked recently, like, I would so be open to, like, coming back and, like, doing, like, if Josh left Sweeney, I'd have no problem replacing Josh and Sweeney. And, like, I just kind of want to come and do something that I want to do, or that is fun to do. And, there just hasn't been that thing come up yet, so it's not necessarily that I don't want to come back or that I don't have the desire to come back. There just hasn't been the thing yet.
Well, I'm just hoping for your City of Angels revival directed by Michael Arden.
Well, I don't know. He's a Tony winner now. He's hard to get. He's
Well,
hard to
you
pin.
could just send him a text after this and be like, so I was thinking, since our Sweeney revival didn't happen, let's cast Catherine Hahn in City of Angels as well.
He's so busy these days, though. He's like, he
Yeah.
doesn't have time to do anything else. He's
Yeah.
got a High Noon coming to Broadway, which is going to be incredible.
Yeah.
Listen, I've known that guy for a long time. Everything he touches turns to gold. I truly believe he is one of the most visionary directors in our generation. And I think that's only going to, like, come to fruition more and more the more opportunity he gets. He's brilliant. He's a brilliant mind, and he's been doing it so well for so long that I'm just thrilled that people are finally starting to, like, take real note of him, because I think he's, like, one of the best talents we have right now. So, but unfortunately, that means it's harder to get him to do things for me.
Just be like, my birthday's coming up, as a favor.
Yeah.
Think about this revival. Wink, wink. We can get Audra McDonald in it. We'll just like.
I feel like he would love City of Angels revival.
I agree. That's why I keep mentioning it. Anyway, so we only have like a few minutes left. So top going theater experiences. Do you have them? What are they?
So the original cast of not Once, Rent. Well,
It's like, oh sorry. Yeah. So my top going.
I saw the original cast of Rent
Mhm.
When my first trip to New York City. The first night I saw Rent, there was a bunch of replacements, and then the next night, Anthony Rapp came and talked to my school. And he felt really bad that all the replacements had been in. And he was like, so if anybody wants to come back, I can do standing room on Saturday for you. So I went back. I was like one of the only people that went back. Me and like two of my friends, I think, went back and saw the original cast. And it was a Broadway Cares collection night. So they were all collecting. And so I got pictures with Adam Pascal and with Anthony. And, like, we actually have a great picture of me with my Rent t-shirt on. I've got an AIDS ribbon on. I've got a Rent hat, and I'm like standing with Anthony, like cheesing for Jesus. And then when he came to see Once, I showed him the photograph, and then I was like, can we please recreate this? And so he put on a Once hat, and we recreated the photo. And then Adam, who I got to know pretty well while I was doing Once, like, that guy was like the reason why I got into musical theater, because I was like, oh, that's a guy like me. Like, I can do that. Like, I can do this. I mean, that's a role. Roger and Rent would have been one that, like, I might have sold a little bit of my soul to be able to do that at one point, because I just love that musical still to this day. It's probably my favorite musical. But that's my top theater going experience, hands down.
Yeah. Well, it's great that you like mentioned that, because I showed you before we started the photo of you and I. So, because I know, because you've talked about like, oh, I don't, stage door or whatever. That's why I'm like, I'm going to show Steve that photo of like a young 19-year-old me and him when he
Yeah.
was Spamalot, and the rest is history. Well, Steve, thank you so much for coming on to the podcast. Is there
That's
anything
my
you want to
pleasure.
like add or say or?
No, I'm just so thankful and like grateful for the opportunity to be here. Like I mean, I don't talk about this stuff a lot, and I don't really, I'm so far removed from a lot of it that it feels like a distant memory. So it's just really nice to like, to talk to somebody and like, to be able to kind of like relive some of those moments, because it's been an incredible ride, and like, who knows where it's going to go from here, but if it all ended today, it was a hell of a ride, so it's just nice to be able to remember it. So thank you for giving me that opportunity today.
I just like, honestly, I'm going to cry again, but it really means like so much to me that you like said yes to doing it. There's very few people that I freak out about when I got the email saying like he would love to do it. I live in a studio apartment. I literally like ran laps in my apartment because I was so excited and just like couldn't believe you said yes to doing this podcast, because I've been a fan of yours for so many years. So it just really means so much to me that you said yes to coming on.
Well,
So
it
truly,
means a lot to me that you had me on. So thank you so much.
and again, you're welcome back anytime.
Okay.
Yeah. So
Okay.
I'm gonna stop recording. You can stay on. And so everyone listening, thanks for listening.